Alright, getting ready to do the neck prep and start mounting the tuners and make sure the neck's ready to go before we mount it on the guitar. One of the first things you want to do is you want to check your relief. I always like to build it with just a little bit of relief, and what that is a slight bow to the neck this way before I mount it up. You can do it straight, but most of the books recommend that you put a little bit of relief in. I only put about a 1/16 of an inch in, and then I readjust after I get strings and everything else installed on the guitar. The best way to check for your relief is a long metal straight edge. Lay it across the frets, and what you see is you want to look right between the frets and the straight edge, and you can see that right now I have about a 1/16 inch of relief across there, right in the center of the neck. I don't know if you can see that very well on the video. Try and get it up there to where you can see it, right between the neck and the straight edge. You can see just a little bit of daylight underneath it, and that's what you want to get. If you want more or less, just a truss adjustment wrench, and you put it on the truss adjustment. If you tighten it, what that's going to do is that's going to straighten the neck and pull it backwards. And if you loosen it going this way, that will put more relief in it as it loosens the truss rod. This is a Warmoth Pro construction truss rod, very stable. Once you set it, I've never had to reset one of mine for minor temperature changes or anything like that. So the relief on this is good. Doesn't need any more adjustment. And like I said, once it's strung up and sat for a couple days with strings on it, then I'll go back in and double check my relief before I do final setup and have final setup done on the guitar. So that is setting your neck relief. So what we want to do is we want to start taking a look at mounting our tuners. And what I'm using for this guitar is a Schaller mini locking tuners. And what we're going to do is next we'll install the 6 tuners and get them installed on the guitar. One of the things you really want to watch out for with the tuners, and a lot of people have trouble with this, is once you get the tuner set, there's a small screw. And we'll talk a little bit more about that once I get the drill out. But a lot of people end up breaking these screws off. And I'll show you a good way to do it without breaking them off, and hopefully it'll be trouble-free for you. Now for the tuners. I'm using the Schaller mini locking tuners. Got them from the Warmoth site. The one thing you want to make sure that your neck hole, the neck is drilled or reamed out to the right size for the tuner. And when I had this neck built, I knew what tuners I was going to put on it, so I specifically, when I ordered the neck, I specifically asked them to drill it to the tuner size that I want. The one thing to remember with the tuners is you want to test fit them. They don't want to press in really hard, but you want to give them a nice test fit. Also, what you want to watch out for, and remember when you get ready to install your tuners, is you have left and right tuners. And you want to make sure that you put them on the right side, or the correct side. What I've done with this is I've already done a test fit, and when you install your tuner, you want it to slide in, and the flat edge should be forward. That way it's all the same, nice and symmetrical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install all 3 tuners on each side. As I've got all the tuners in, you can see how they're all symmetrical and nice and straight. The next thing to do is going to be to straighten these out and make sure they're all straight with one another. And then you can see from the front, and you want to take a look and make sure they're all straight with one another. Part of the way I do that is I just kind of set all the tuner knobs heading in the same direction, and it'll help me when I get ready to check and make sure it's all straight. What I did in this circumstance, as well, just to double check everything, is I took and laid my straight edge across the top of the 2 tuners. And I wanted to make sure, as I went down to each one, lay that straight edge in there and make sure that the tuner is straight on the straight edge with the other one across. So like I said, what I've done is I've lined these up, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to snug these down. And I run them most of the way in by hand just to make sure I'm not cross-threading anything, because I don't want to cross-thread my tuner in. And then just take my socket wrench and I'm going to snug it just a little bit. Now you got to be careful with this because as you're doing this, your tuner may turn a little bit. So I'm actually just kind of holding the back end of the tuner with my finger as I run the nuts down. All right, when you get ready to drill your pilot holes, a couple things you want to make sure, and I'll try and get as good at this on the video as I can. You want to make sure your drill bit is the right size. The way I do it is I just kind of lay the drill bit right down in front of the screw and I look at it straight on. And what I want to see is I want to see the drill bit cover the solid area of the screw. Let's see if I can get that in there. And then, but you still want to see threads on the outside. If you see any solid part of the screw, then you need to go up a little bit bigger on your drill bit, because that's the mistake most people make, is they don't drill the pilot hole big enough. And what it ends up doing is it makes the screw go in hard and they end up snapping it off, because as you can see, this is a very, very small screw. I'm using a 1/16 drill bit, and what I'm going to do with that is I've kind of put a depth mark on my drill bit. You can see this bit of blue tape. Basically that's what I'm doing, is I basically set the screw up to it. That way I know how far the screw goes in. I mark the tape, that way I know I drill my... The electric drill works just fine. You just want to go slow, and you want to make sure you go nice and carefully. So I've got my drill bit on, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drill all 6 holes. I want to start slowly. I want to make sure my drill bit's centered in the hole. I've got my holes drilled into my pilot holes. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install my screws. Now, one thing you want to do is you want to put something on the screws to lubricate them going in. Candle wax is fine. You don't want to use something that's unscented. There's a product that you can pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot or any of the other Ace Hardware, anything like that, called Screw Ease, which is a screw lubricant. I'm going to go ahead and use a candle. You want to avoid using soap, because a lot of times soap have chemicals in them that will actually soak into the wood and weaken the wood. Not so important with the tuner screws, because these are here just to mainly keep it from rotating. The nut on the front keeps it tight, but for your neck screws, when you mount the neck on the guitar, you don't want that moving around. So basically what I do is I just take and just get a little bit of wax in the threads, install it in the hole, make sure you're using the right size screwdriver, and just nice and gently screw the screw in. I've finished putting all the screws in. Snug down the nuts on the front of the tuners to make sure they're good and snug, and I've added my Warmoth Made in USA sticker. Hard to find these the metal ones anymore, but this one's a metal one, so had one laying around from one of our previous builds. The only thing left to do on this neck now is to install my truss rod cover. I'm going to hold off doing that because I'm going to try and find get a custom made one to go on there, so I don't want to drill holes for that right now. That can be done later after the build process. Nothing really stops the progress of the guitar with not having that done. So that's the neck complete. The next step is going to be moving on to the body for the body prep, and then finally getting around to putting this thing all together. So that is the neck prep, covering relief, installation of tuner holes, and installation of tuners, and getting the neck ready to go and mounted on the guitar.